Hey, welcome to the Revenge of the Show. This is my trip to the Kalamazoo Air Museum. Here I am on a skyway, which cost thousands of dollars to get over. Anyway, this drive from Chicago, going through Indiana, into Michigan, probably takes about 2 hours, something like that. I went there on a Sunday, a Super Bowl Sunday, so I was hoping there wasn't going to be many people there. Here I am getting there. That's my map. And don't pay attention to the shark in the water. And here I am. The parking lot is really, it's not full at all. A few airplanes out in front. And here's the entranceway inside. This is the main hall where you see this P-40 hanging from the ceiling. And it's a really nice little lobby. The staff is really friendly. Like I said, well, I didn't say it, but this is the first time I've ever been here. There's where you could buy stuff. They don't have great model kits or anything there, but it's really cool. That P-40 is really nice looking. And this is where you're really entering the museum right now. This is a little hallway. It's kind of neat. It's lit up like the sky. And then you come out to see this. This would be the main building right here. And let's go for a little walk through. I'll tell you a little bit about certain stuff that's inside this museum. So you see a SPAD, a Sopwith. All these are recreations. Like the Sopwith is, or the SPAD rather, VII was manufactured or recreated in 1978. And here we go to more modern jets. This is an F-14A that's on loan from the National Aviation Museum. This craft was built in 1977. It was flown to the museum in 1997 by Dale Snodgrass, who's a really famous F-14 pilot. He has got more landings and stuff in an F-14 ever. He died a few years ago in an air crash. But anyway, this plane was also used by him in Desert Storm. This is a Desert Storm flown aircraft. Now, the early F-14s, most of them had the TF-30 Pratt & Whitney engines in them, which had a lot of problems. If one of them flamed out or stalled, you'd go into a flat spin, just like in Top Gun. It was worried that it was because where the engine placements are pretty far apart, that angle of attack was the problem, but it was mainly the engine. Those were replaced with F-110 GE400 engines, and they seemed to relieve the problem a lot. That it became a really better aircraft at that time. And here you see the 20mm M61A1 Vulcan cannon that could shoot 6,000 rounds per minute, and it was designed in 1946, believe it or not. It didn't carry that many rounds in it, of course. You could carry 675 rounds, which is a lot of rounds. The plane wears the Jolly Rogers colors, and it's really a beautiful looking airplane. Looks pristine. Looks like you could fly it today. Just in case you didn't know, this is a swing wing airplane. This came about because Robert McNamara was trying to shove the F-111 down the Navy's throat. They said no. So Admiral Tom Connolly said, hey, it's a terrible airplane. So they started making the Grumman F-14 Tomcat, named after Tom Connolly. And, that's how it's called, the Tomcat. And there you see Snodgrass's name on the side of the airplane. Really cool. Now, this airplane is capable of doing Mach 2.34. It's got a combat range of 500 miles. And there were approximately, I think there was exactly 712 built from 1969 to 1991. It has a Hughes AN APG-71 radar that could shoot a Phoenix missile 100 miles. Allegedly, it did well in test. That's about it. You could carry 6 of them, but you know what? You can't land back on the carrier with six of those missiles on it. It's way too heavy. And only if Goose would have just when he ejected, hit the switch that takes the canopy off first before they eject, he would have lived, because you have to do that sequence. Otherwise, you might hit your head. And here's the airplane that took over for the F-14 in almost every role was the F-18, Super Hornet and Hornet. And I'd just like to say that this museum has a lot of interactive stuff. If you got kids, they'll have a blast over here. I didn't really document them, but there's a lot of stuff. The kids were having a ball at this place. Take your family. They'll have a fun time. And here is the Vought F8J Crusader. It had a top speed of 1,225 miles per hour or 1,227. Who knows? It's somewhere in that range. It had four 20 millimeter Colt MK12 guns on it that had a little bit of difficulty in them. They would sometimes jam a lot, especially after a dogfight. The guns would jam. And it had a Pratt & Whitney engine, a J57 P20. There was 1,261 of these aircraft built, and they performed really well in Vietnam. They did a lot of work for the Navy. It's a very interesting and beautiful plane. This plane isn't in the greatest shape in the world, but it is nevertheless something that people should really check out. I mean, it's one of the forgotten airplanes of that era, along with the Corsair of the same style of airplane. Anyway, here we go with the F-18. This is not a Super Hornet. This is an earlier version of the Hornet. And we swing around over here, and there's the ass end of this Crusader. That would be a lot of power coming out of there. There is an A4 Skyhawk, another one of these planes that were used heavily during Vietnam, and also was used, and I think still used, for Top Gun students. Now, this is the main reason why I came to this museum, is to see an SR-71B. You can't see the other SR-71B because it crashed on January 11th, 1968, due to a double generator failure. He managed to bring the airplane almost to where he could land it, but on approach, it crashed, and both the instructor pilot and the student ejected safely. Now, here's the surviving one right here. Look at those BF Goodrich tires. Now, those tires, you could only get about 12 landings out of them before they fail. I mean, you're landing really quick. You're really heavy. You don't take off with a full load of fuel. And we're talking about a weight of 172,000 pounds when this thing takes off with those big J58 engines. Now, if you see here, those spikes, you have to put them on the right sides, or they kind of bank in a little bit when they're on airplanes, so you can't reverse them. This is the double cockpit. The instructor pilot is in the back seat, and the student is in the front seat. And so this is just a model kit that I don't know that much about it. You might be able to read some of the text over there, but it is really, really cool looking. It's signed, it looks like, by a lot of SR-71 pilots and crew members and whatnot. Speaking of that, just, the parachute comes out of this airplane. It takes 4 guys to pack it. And you got to get bird shit off this airplane too, because bird shit is really bad for titanium. This engine will grow 6 inches. It's made out of all kinds of different types of metals and steels and all kinds of stuff. There's these big pipes that go along over there that also give the airplane some thrust. This engine, this Pratt & Whitney engine, is just an incredible piece of machinery. The amount of thrust that this thing puts out to make an airplane go with the afterburner going constantly at Mach 3 and above for long periods of times. And when you start it up, you get the TEB. You shoot that in there, and that lights the fuel, because the fuel that it uses, if you threw a match on it, it's not going to catch on fire. So you got to mix it with this chemical that I'll get into later. Now, this last thing here, you look at this body of it, you see the fins at the bottom. Those fins are unique to the SR-71B. And again, those fins have to be there because that weird cockpit on the top affects the aerodynamics of the airplane. Now, when they had to build this airplane, they had a real problem out in California. When they were building it, they were using water over there, and the water was having a bad effect because chlorine hurts titanium. So they had to make a process to where when they use water, it was distilled, I suppose. As this plane flies, the nose bends up, first down, and then when the fuel starts going away, then up. You have to fly it to a tanker, and you don't communicate with the tanker. The tanker has to be there. So I was talking to one guy who flew a tanker, and he knew a guy that they weren't at the destination that they were supposed to be at, and that SR-71 ran out of fuel and crashed. Needless to say, that tanker pilot never flew tanker missions again, if he even flew again. And those tanker pilots have to be amazing, because once you take off, it's radio silence. When you plug into the tanker, then you are talking to the tanker. Otherwise, it's nobody's talking to each other. Now, this B model doesn't have any cameras on it or sensors on it, so there's a lot of ballast that they put inside this aircraft, so the nose is different and everything else like that, just to keep it in the weight. They don't take any pictures or anything. And here is the Buick Wildcat V8 engine. They used two of them to start these things up back in the day. You went through a lot of them. Once you spun that engine up, and if you let that thing go and that engine started spinning really fast, it would blow that engine up. So apparently they went through a lot of Wildcat engines. I heard a story where they went through every Buick V8 400 engine or 455 engine in the country, going through junkyards and all kinds of stuff like that. Now, if this was an SR-71 with the cameras, you'd have to, 24 hours before flight, preheat the cameras to 150 degrees and keep them at 150 degrees. Because flying at those speeds and altitudes, you don't want to screw up. You want to keep that temperature the same because it will distort the picture otherwise. And the film they use is like 5 inches, and there's all kinds of different sensors. Anyway, here's the cockpit. This is what I really was excited to do. When I went to the Kalamazoo Air Museum in February, they had open cockpits. So one of them was the SR-71B. You could go and look inside it. Really, really cool. And you just look at this thing. It is just gorgeous. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the stuff that's inside here. Like if you're the pilot, you get in there, you got these little clips on the floor that clip into your boots. So if you have to eject, it pulls your feet back and then you hit that thing. And then you punch out. Now, the fastest ejection I have ever heard about is a Mach 3.25. Bill Park was flying the M21 along with another pilot. What was his name? Ray Tork. Unfortunately, Ray Tork drowned before he could be rescued by the rescuers, but Bill Park survived. The M21 collided with the D21. It's a whole nother story. There's film footage. If I could find it, I will put it in a link in the description because it is quite possibly the only footage of an SR-71 flying at Mach 3 filmed from another SR-71. Now, the one thing they're going to point out here in this cockpit, I think is one of the coolest things, is this TEB counter and 16 millimeter map. But the TEB counter, you have 16 shots of TEB. TEB is tetraethyl-boron. It's a liquid, and it's the thing that starts the engines up. And you only have 1.25 pints inside the aircraft to do that. Once you run out of that stuff, there's a little counter there of 16. You're out. That's it. No more. Let's talk about the speed of the SR-71. The A12 was probably faster than the SR-71. It was lighter and it was a little bit smaller. And look at those sunscreen shades and stuff like that you need. Anyway, now a pilot named Brian Shaw says he reached Mach 3.5 over Libya in 1986. Now, is this true? I don't know. Yeah, Brian Shaw also claims that he talked this whole thing about the speed checks and stuff like that, where he would talk to a control tower, even though nobody talks on that frequency. I've seen other SR-71 pilots say that these stories aren't really true. I don't know. Brian Shaw flew the SR-71 for a long time. He sells a book that goes for like $200-300. He seems like a great guy. He's got a remarkable career. I don't know if these stories are true. I saw another person say 3.4, and they had some real problems with it. That ejection seat, by the way, is built primarily for the SR-71, built by Lockheed Martin. I mean, yes, Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. But so the plane grows. I've heard from 6 to 12 feet or inches. I don't know what the real truth is. I don't know if anybody really knows.
That's so many buttons. Yeah.
So the altitude, I've heard anything from 85 to 90,000 feet. I'm sure there's people that say 100,000 feet, but I'm guessing about 85,000. There was 50 aircraft built in total. There was 13 A-12s, 2 M-21s, 3 YF-12s, and 32 SR-71s. Two of those are Bs. And then there was the one that was a mixture of an SR-71 and an A-12. So I want to do more SR-71 videos and other aircraft videos. If you have a museum and you want to let me in and go and check them out on my own, that would be great. Let me know. Facebook, all that stuff. So let's go into the rest of this place and see the World War I stuff here. You see that's replica, and there you see what it is there. And there's this other aircraft over here that I'm not quite sure what it is, but I will put it in the description. You see all kinds of clothing and stuff like that. There's a Junkers in the background somewhere. And here we go. This is another reason why I came to this museum on this day in February. You could go in and sit in an aircraft each weekend of the month. And this one was the P-47 that I got to go into. So let's look at this beautiful, underrated airplane. I mean, Gabby Gabreski shot down a hell of a lot of airplanes in World War II on one of these things. The 8th Air Force, if they would have let them use drop tanks and gone with them early part of the war when the 8th Air Force was getting murdered, they might not have lost as many airplanes, but the 8th Air Force thought, well, we got all these machine guns on them and we will take care of it ourselves. So, you know, those airplanes shot down a lot of great German pilots during the early part of World War II, and here I am going to sit down in a cockpit. Yeah, I can't believe I'm sitting in a P-47 right now.
You surely are.
Well, you really need those guys on the wings to guide you down the taxiway.
Yeah, right, because you don't see much over the front. You have to peek out the side.
Yeah, you gotta kind of weave it, right?
Yeah.
Wow. This is...
I was reading all your signs.
Now the P-47 had a Pratt & Whitney R2800 59 18-cylinder engine. That was the P-47 D-21. It had a horsepower of 2,300 in war emergency settings, and this plane could go 426 miles per hour. Now, I've heard that it could go faster in certain configurations if you adjusted your manifold pressure. Turbo. Here's a it had this super turbocharger on it. It was massive. I mean, it took the whole back end of the airplane. Now, on that one spot over there, I think that's where the gun switches. You turn it on. Now, I'm not absolutely positive that this has the water ejection on the throttle, but I love being inside this airplane. I could have stayed there all day. There's a lot of people that were waiting in line, so I didn't want to take everybody's time, but I could have stayed in there for a long period of time. And then if you raise up in your seat and you're like, okay, let's say you got to bail out of this thing. It's like, well, then you kind of get an idea. It's like, okay, how do I bail out of this thing, even though I don't have the tail there to see it? But it's like, you got to avoid that tail when you jump out. Anyway, I wish I could have stayed in there longer and given you more video, but I couldn't. I don't want to make people wait. Love that airplane. And the V1, this is on loan from the Smithsonian. It's got a range of 150 miles and a speed of 400 miles per hour, or maybe a range of 160 anyway. I believe it's the real deal. Here's some bomb sites. The Sperry bomb site, which is just as good as the Norton bomb site. And the Norton bomb site is one of the most overrated things that ever came out of World War II. The Germans knew all about it. They were trying to keep it secret, blah, blah, blah. It did not have the really good... It was like 1,000 feet at least from where you're aiming for. So that's that. Now, this XP-55 was given to the Air Zoo by the Smithsonian, and they restored it. It has a total of 27 flying hours on it, and it is unveiled in 2006 at this museum. Now, in the front, this would have had 4 50 caliber machine guns in it, and it would be powered by an Allison V1710-95 liquid-cooled V12 engine. It would supposedly had a speed of 390 miles per hour. Now, there's 3 of them built. One crashed and a pilot survived. One's here at the museum. and the other one crashed during an air show at Wright Field on May 27th, 1945. Now, the pilot was killed in that crash. Now, the first flight of this aircraft was July 19th, 1943. As testing kept progressing, it was found out that this plane wasn't meeting expectations. It's very futuristic, very wacky looking. It's cool. I mean, there's nothing really much like this, but it didn't work very well. I don't think Curtiss did a hell of a lot after this, but this propeller, which is very interesting, the pilot will eject that propeller if he has to bail out of it, so he doesn't get killed by the propeller. That's a very interesting setup right there. I mean, that Allison V12 engine, I mean, that's a pretty powerful engine. I think they use that on P-38 and a few other airplanes, but I mean, it's beautiful looking. And then we're going to see this big gun after we come over here. Weird trim tabs. Look at that. I think it's a Bofors gun. I could be wrong. Let me know if you know. And now we're going to go look at the F2M. This is the Wildcat. Look at that landing gear. You have to crank that up by yourself. Now, this airplane was flown by Butch O'Hara, one of the first Navy pilots who won the Congressional Medal of Honor. But this airplane took on a lot of stuff early on in the Pacific Theater. It took on a lot of the best pilots in the Navy and in the Japanese Air Force and Navy. And you could dive a Wildcat. There's really no limit to diving it. It's crazy. And then, of course, you got the Hellcat. The Hellcat came on during World War II, and you got these two Navy airplanes that were doing a hell of a lot of stuff. The Wildcat is just underrated. It fought so long in World War II, all the way to the end. Now, most of these airplanes, I believe, were found in Lake Michigan, and some of them, this one here is a survivor, I believe, of like nuclear testing and stuff like that. It was a drone. That's where this came from, I believe. That's where you get a lot of these aircraft, Lake Michigan and test drones, as far as Hellcats are concerned. That's a big R2800 Pratt & Whitney engine that went into many fighters during World War II, but especially it's most known for going into the F4U Corsair. This is an FG1 Corsair. It's a Goodyear-built Corsair. It had a flyworthiness. It probably flew to this airport by the Kalamazoo. Look at the big 50 caliber machine guns going there. But Corsairs came built by three different manufacturers: Goodyear, Chancevaux, and Brewster. There's a Brewster Corsair being restored right now. No Brewsters fought in World War II, but the FG1s and F4Us did. The FG1, this is an FG1D. Its bomb configuration, it could carry different amounts of bomb than the F4U1. And then, there's a whole bunch of different variants of the F4U. You got this big R2800 engine with it. When you put water injection in it later on, this thing was fast, and this thing could shoot down a lot of different stuff. A lot of different Japanese airplanes were pretty scared of it, with those three 50 calibers in each wing. Pilot raised up. It was hard to see. It took a while for them to fly off of aircraft carriers. The British were the first ones to really start using them on their aircraft carriers, and those wings on the British ones are cut short because their storage in their aircraft carriers was lower than the American aircraft carriers. About 128 aircraft were lost in Lake Michigan, and this is one of the airplanes that was taken and now restored. This SDBD, it flew for a long time until it crashed in Lake Michigan in 1944. The pilot survived, and I believe he even helped come in and watch some of the restoration. This aircraft was taken out of Lake Michigan on June 19th, 2009. Unfortunate thing about the stuff in Lake Michigan is the zebra mussels are really starting to get at these old airplanes that are down below. Now, I have to talk about this guy named Stanley W. Vatassa. His nickname was Swede. During the Battle of the Coral Sea, Swede shot down claimed three Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters in the Dauntless. Swede later shot down 7 airplanes in one day in an F-4F Wildcat. And this was in the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands. 7. Nobody's ever done that before. 70 years later, an attempt was made to give him a Medal of Honor, but he still just has the Navy Cross. This Sky Raider was used by the French in combat in North Africa. The Sky Raider was built from 1945 to 1957. There was 3,180 Sky Raiders built. The firepower on a Sky Raider was 4 20mm AN M3 cannons with 200 rounds per gun. It had hard points where you could carry 8,000 pounds of bombs on this thing. It's at a maximum speed of 322 miles per hour, and it was used mainly for close air support. Well, it's pretty much all it did. It had a Wright R3350 26 duplex Cyclone 18-cylinder air-cooled radio piston engine. And as we look around the World War II gallery, look, seeing again this big engine on the front of this plane, we see this plane here that kind of was like, what the hell's going on here? This is a T-28 Trojan over here, right? With Blue Angel colors. But the Blue Angels never used that. From what I read, this was a grand champion at Oshkosh in like 1974 or something like that. But this was a trainer that was used throughout, the Air Force and the Navy used it. It's a beautiful looking plane, but no, the Blue Angels did not use this airplane. Now we're going to head outside. So when you go to the second building, you got to walk through the parking lot, and there's a little bit of a walk. If the lot's empty and your car's by the front door, just drive it to the closest section over there. You walk past all these airplanes over there, and I'm just going to let you enjoy and look at them, and I'll play some music before we get into building 2. So when you get to the second building, this is one of the first things you see in there is this A10 engine cowling, and it was hit pretty bad. Now, if you want, you could pause the video, and certain part you could read the plaque over here. It's a pretty long story, and I don't have enough time to talk about it. This video is already 40 minutes, not at the 40-minute mark yet, but yeah, and then there's another part where you could pause it and watch it for yourself. And it's pretty damn cool. This plane came back. Those A-10s are tough. Love those A-10s. Fairchild did a heck of a job with that. Then we're going to go and see this other big room. So here we go with a F-104 Starfighter. At one point it held a whole bunch of speed records. It's like the missile with the man in it. This airplane, they made into the U-2 spy plane pretty much. And this is the airplane that Chuck Yeager crashed, and he probably effed up. He screwed up the pooch. He screwed the pooch when he tried to do that altitude record. And look at that gun on that F-104. I mean, it looks speedy. Now, this is F-117. This is a brainchild of Ben Rich, who designed the spikes for the SR-71. It was his brainchild. We'll get back to that. We're going to look at that gun again. I mean, that's a hell of a gun. I'll tell you what gun that is in a minute. And, you know, the camera's kind of was acting up a lot, so you know, everything's kind of a little choppy, but you get a great idea of what this whole room looks like. I mean, look at that. It's like just like a bullet. That's exactly how Kelly Johnson intended that. What a genius he was. There's some other airplanes. There's that F-104 again with those GE engines that thing went fast. Mach 2 point something. Here's a restoration booth where they're restoring another Wildcat. It's in a paint booth. I wish it was outside of the paint booth. I would have loved to have been able to see that restoration process going on outside of it, but that's pretty cool. I think like a day or two after I was here, they took it out, they rolled it out, and look at the landing gear. I mean, it is really, really, it's pretty cool when they restore these airplanes. I'm guessing that's going to be light blue. And here's the wings being restored on that Wildcat. Looks like they're getting pretty far with that. I don't know how much longer they're going to take before this airplane is completely finished, but it could be a while. Here's a F-86 with the engines out. Look at that. You can see through the whole damn thing. It's not going to go very fast without those engines on it. Yeah, they were pretty good airplanes. That's a MiG-15 back there. That's what they fought against. That's a F-4U miniature Corsair. My brother worked on that thing. And here's the F-117. Now, they don't do it like this anymore. Skunk Works really did this on the cheap. If you built one of these airplanes, Ford Motor Company, when they built the Taurus, they spent more money designing the Ford Taurus than it did to make the F-117. They don't do that anymore. Prices are astronomical all over the place. I mean, it's crazy. And look at that. There's signatures of, I don't know who all these signatures are. There's a lot of signatures. And this is the first time I got to look inside the bomb bay of a F-117. Well, the first time I saw an F-117, it was at Oshkosh. There was guys all around the airplanes with guns. They weren't letting you close. As a matter of fact, this skin that's on this airplane is not the original skin. The skin was taken off of it, and because they don't want anybody knowing what they're making that skin out of. There's a MiG-15 versus F-86. They're both formidable against each other. There's some F-117 patches, which is really cool. And here we are looking at the back of this thing. This is Homan. I mean, they restored this whole skin, this fake skin, onto the plane. It still looks good. I think the skin looks better on this one than I saw at the Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Here's a big-ass Pratt & Whitney engine. This engine, I forget the number of it right now, but I will tell you in the description here on the booth. But this they put in an FG-1D, that big monster engine. That's a Pratt & Whitney R45 something. It has a lot of horsepower to it, and wow. And here's more restoring of another Dauntless. Now, one of the Dauntlesses that they restored was a Battle of Midway survivor, and that got shipped to Pearl Harbor. When the Navy owns these airplanes still, the Navy is really particular about it. It's hardly ever when a Navy plane is transferred to a civilian or to a museum. The Navy almost always owns a lot of these airplanes. Not all of them, but a lot of them. There's that Wright engine sitting on a table over there. I believe that's a Wright engine. I don't know what engine that is. That's pretty cool, but that's a J57 right there. Here we got some Saturn stuff. This is a Saturn engine right here. This is the Rocketdyne F1 engine. I think it's a second or third stage. I don't know for sure. I'll put that on there. This guy's checking out that engine. That's pretty neat. And now you go inside here. These little lights turn on and off. It's really cool. How these, the power of these engines is unbelievably powerful. I don't know enough about this engine to be able to just tell you right now off the fly, but it's really neat looking inside there. And we're going to be going into space soon. So after we look at this engine one last time, because it is quite remarkable, anything from the Apollo program is pretty neat. We're going to go into the space room, and I'm just going to play some music on here because I tell you the truth, I don't know enough about this stuff here to be able to give you a really good talking to, but I hope you get to like what you see over here and enjoy the view. So here's my final stop before I leave the museum. This is a spot that you overlook the main gallery. You could eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner up there. I was there on a Sunday, so it was a shorter day. I had about 5 hours to shoot this whole thing. There's a bunch of airplanes that I didn't document real heavily. You could see them in certain things. I'll have some pictures of them here, like a Messerschmitt 190, then a Cobra and helicopters and a bunch of other things here and there that I didn't document on video, but I tried my best in the time that I was there, and I think you got a really good idea what this museum looks like. Thank you for watching. Hope you like and subscribe, and I hope that I could go to other places and get more of a hands-on look into these airplanes and whatever museum I'm going to go to for whatever it is. Thanks. And one other thing, there's another small room in this place that's dedicated to the Guadalcanal campaign. There's just a few photographs at the end of this video. Check them out. It's an interesting thing. Next time I go back there, I will check that out even more.